Radiomaster have just released what I believe could be the first proper nail in the coffin for Crossfire, and that is official ExpressLRS 915 modules. Now, Radiomaster really has been smashing it out the park with regards to their ExpressLRS systems. All of their radios now are available in ExpressLRS versions. They've been making some really nice ExpressLRS modules with the likes of the Ranger series, and now we have the Bandit series that brings us really nice off-the-shelf 915 version modules. Now, this isn't actually going to be a review of such, it's more of an overview of the product. I will share some opinions on the hardware at the end of this video, but I will not be testing these modules in the real world in this video for a number of reasons. However, if you're interested in finding out what they're all about, please do make sure you stick around. Now, just to be crystal clear before we move forward, Radiomaster did send me these modules to take a look at here today. However, they have not paid me to make this video. They have not seen this video before it's been published. And as always, my thoughts are entirely my own. The Bandit series from Radiomaster is their push into 915Mhz ExpressLRS. We saw earlier this year Radiomaster released their Ranger series, which gave us some fantastic modules on 2.4 gigs, but these are their new modules specifically designed for that lower 915 band. Now, like the Ranger series, there are 3 separate modules available on these Bandits. We have the Bandit Nano, which is a nano bay module designed to fit on radios such as the Radiomaster Pocket and other radios with the nano bay on the back. We have the Bandit Micro, which is a JR Bay module, and then we have the large Bandit, which is an external module that will go on a JR Bay, it will go on a Nano Bay, but it also is designed to be used with third-party radios such as Futaba. Now, quickly showing you what you get in the box with each one before we move over to the specs and some of the real interesting capabilities. We'll look at the full-size Bandit first of all. Now, if you've seen the Ranger module, what you'll see here is going to be very familiar. Radiomaster have completely redone their packaging, which is really nice to see. We do have the Ranger module itself. It is that full size one. It in CNC. This is that metal module, but rather than it be black, it's now grey, and we've got this plastic cover over the top here as well. I'm assuming that's for protection, just to help you stop damaging the module when it's on the back of your radio. We then have our JR Bay attachment, which mounts to the back of the module, allowing you to put it inside normal radios. We have our Nano Bay module, which again allows you to mount it onto your smaller radios. We then have a little pack which contains some screws as well as a cable that is designed to go into the bottom, allowing us to connect it to other radios such as Futaba. And then if we go into the bottom of the box, we will find down here we have 2 antennas. They include a Moxon antenna in the kit, and they also include a standard T-shaped antenna in this kit as well. Looking around the full-size module in a bit more detail, obviously we have our OLED display on the front, our 2 control buttons, as well as our 5-way joystick. We have our RP SMA antenna port on the top. Flipping over to the back, you have the input that is used with the adapters that they include in the box. And then if we go around to the bottom, you will find that we have a USB-C port for updating the firmware, a Crossfire port for connecting to third-party radios, a UART, which is receive and transmit, as well as our DC input, which supports 6 volt to 16.8. Now, externally, this module is full CNC metal. You can see on the front here that we've got the fan there that's going to offer exceptional cooling in use. And this is the more solid module of the 3 because it is designed to be on the back of the radio. And they've got this plastic cover over the top here that just offers a little bit of extra protection. Next, doing a quick unboxing of the Bandit Nano and the Micro. I'm not actually sure which way round. Oh, that one's the Nano, that one's the Micro. Now, I'm going to assume both of these are actually packaged pretty much the same. What we're going to find is our module as well as our antenna in the bottom of the box and a little set of instructions. Again, they include the T antenna with this one. This is the Omni antenna, and then we've got the Nano Module there. We'll move on and open the other one, and then we'll take a closer look at both of them together. Again, they're going to give you another T antenna in there. I'm not going to open that one up. And then we've got our micro module. Now, obviously, these are designed for smaller radios. We've got our JR Bay fitment on this one. Both modules have OLED displays. Both modules have external power connections, XT30s. Both have our joystick as well as our USB-C for updating the firmware. We've got RPSMA connectors on the top. And then if we flip them around the back, you can see there we've got our input, standard JR Bay and standard Nano. Now you can see there is cooling visible on both of these modules. So on the front here, you can see the main grill for that heatsink. And that's also the case here on this one there. Again, just helping keep the modules cool. You will note that the ports on the micro module are set down a bit into it compared to what we have on this one here. However, I don't really see that being too much of an issue. There's a lot of space around there, so I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. Now, walking you through the specs on these modules, and the great thing is that they are all very similar. So all three modules support up to 1 watt of RF output on 915 megahertz. All three modules have OLED displays, all three modules have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and all three modules have external power connection as well. All three modules support the same ExpressLRS features, which is to 200 Hz on 915, and you have all of that other additional functionality that you've come to find in ExpressLRS, as well as all of that control functionality via the OLED displays. Now, the large Ranger module does have a few other little bells and whistles like built-in colour changing LEDs. However, the two smaller modules also have a party trick as well. These have a built-in UART that allows you to use them with the ExpressLRS airport function. If you don't know what that is, it allows you to convert these radio modules into a full set of telemetry radios, meaning that you can use them like a set of those RF design radios that I've talked about on this channel before, and it means you can actually convert them to a full 1 watt telemetry link with that airport functionality in ExpressLRS. All three modules have the same core features with regards to ExpressLRS as well. So for instance, they all have backpack support, they all have TCXO oscillators, which means you're going to get fantastic frequency accuracy, and they all support the main features and all have the same wide range of voltage input, which is 6 to 16 volt via the DC port. Really, your decision between these modules comes down to your fitment. They all offer the same main functionality. It simply comes down to, do you want a Nano Bay? Do you want a JR module, or do you want something that you're going to be able to use not only on these two connections, but also on something like Futaba? Now, the real nice thing about the fact that there are three modules is there's one for every use case. If you want the smallest possible setup, you can go with the Nano. That will work with radios like the Radiomaster Pocket, but you could even use that on some bigger radios as well, or any radio that has that Nano Bay. You then have the micro module in the middle, the standard JR one, which is going to go in something like the TX16S, the Boxer, or any other third-party radio too with that JR Bay option. Then you have the full-size Ranger. This not only will fit on both of these radios if you really wanted to, because it does come with those brackets that allow it to go on a JR Bay or a Nano Bay, but it will also go on third-party radios because it has that external Crossfire input on the bottom, which means that you can use it on the likes of Futaba and others. And really, more than anything, they give you options to choose the module that best suits your needs. These two modules that you can see here do come with standard T omnidirectional antennas, but the larger module, as I showed on the unboxing, also comes with a Moxon directional antenna, again allowing you to just get some extra performance from the bigger unit. Alongside the modules, Radiomaster also have some receivers available for them as well, and we're going to take a closer look at them next. There are two new receivers. We have the BR1 and the BR3. Now, these two offer quite different features and functionality. We have one which is going to be for standard use, the BR1, and then you've got the BR3 that is really aimed at more long-range FPV use, and we'll talk about that one in a second. Now, the BR1 is a standard 915 or 868 receiver, depending on the firmware you install. It features a single antenna connection. It comes with a T antenna in the kit. We get some wires, and there is also a smaller antenna included with it as well if you wanted to put it in more compact installations. Now, this one features a 50 milliwatt telemetry output, and again works with all of the new Bandit modules. It is Crossfire input UART down the bottom here, depending on what option you want to choose. And then you've simply got your main chipset there. We've got the ESP on that side there with our antenna UFL connector there. Moving over to the BR3. Now this one is designed, as I've already mentioned, for much more long-range applications. The first thing you'll notice is that it is a dual antenna setup. It is antenna diversity, not full diversity on this receiver, as I understand it. But the real big benefit on this receiver compared to the other one is the increased telemetry RF output. This one has up to 500 milliwatts of RF output on the telemetry compared to the 50 milliwatts on the standard one. That means this unit is going to give you far better range and performance over the standard receiver, and whereas this one is going to be ideal for small installations on maybe normal to small quads, this you're going to want to be putting into your bigger long range quads, your planes, and anything where you want to get that absolute maximum performance. Now, just getting these under the camera a little bit closer so you can see them, you can see that we've got our SX chipset down there, which is the main RF one, and then we've got our power amplifier there next to the antennas, which is giving us that up to 500 milliwatts of RF output. There is that button there, and then our pads. And then if I flip it over and just move it into focus, you can see then we got our ESP32. There's a little chip antenna down there that is used for the Wi-Fi functionality. There is a TXCO oscillator on both of these receivers, as well as you see in the transmitters. So again, it's going to give you great frequency stability. You can see that just located there. And overall, the build quality on these looks really, really good. Jumping back to the standard one, there again, you can see we've got our RF chipset, but this time there's no additional power amplifier for the telemetry. And then if we spin it over, again, we see our ESP32, our TXCO oscillator down there. And I'm not seeing a chip antenna for the Wi-Fi on this one. Actually, no, there isn't. You can see the track is just there for it. So alongside the other changes on the other receiver, the other one's probably going to have a little bit better Wi-Fi range as a result of having that little chip antenna, but I wouldn't expect it to be a lot of difference. But it may help when you're setting these up if your router isn't in the same room, if you're using that Wi-Fi functionality. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the depths of ExpressLRS in this video, but I am just going to touch a little bit on the options that are available on these transmitter modules. Just to walk you through these modules powered on, I've got the big Bandit attached to a TX16S. You can see it there. I've got it on the JR Bay attachment. Now, it has the main menu system from ExpressLRS. So what you have is all of the usual controls. If I press and hold the button, we can go in and adjust the packet rate. We can go in and do TX power, telemetry ratio, motion detect for the module to turn the display on and off, and a couple of other functions. We've got the gamepad functionality, the bind mode, and again, all of this is the same as we find within ExpressLRS on any other ExpressLRS module with a built-in display. We then have our two customizable keys. These you can control via the Wi-Fi configurator, and you can program them to quick options. So for instance, you can just have a one button press to change your power option, or you can have a one button press to change your rate. We then have the built-in LEDs down the side, which is just more than anything a little bit of a bling, but you can change that in the Wi-Fi configurator as well. Taking a look at the micro module in the back of the same radio, you can see there this is a lot smaller than you have on the full size Bandit. This is probably the best option for most people who are going to put it into a standard radio, but it doesn't have all of that extra stuff that the large one does, like the ability to use it on things like Futaba radios, that external mounted module which gives you some extra options as well with the I/O, and those nice little features like the customizable buttons. However, it's still going to give you up to 1 watt of RF output. We've still got our DC input. It just sits much flatter on the back of the radio, but it's still got plenty of cooling on board. I'm not going to go back through the menu options on this. It's exactly the same. And again, it has all of that great ExpressLRS functionality. Now, just showing you the Nano Module on the back of the Radiomaster Pocket, a really nice use case for this. You can see here we've got our little LED along the centre, but other than that, there's not a great deal to see here on the back side other than what we have on the display, and this is exactly the same as it is on all of the other models. So again, we can press and hold, go into the settings, we can set the packet rate, we can choose what we want on that, we can scroll through to VTX admin, Wi-Fi, bind mode, Bluetooth game, telemetry radio, power, and all of the usual options, just like we've seen on all of them. And again, it just gives a lot more capabilities to the radio, such as the Pocket. Not only does it have 250 milliwatt ExpressLRS built in on 2.4 gigs, if you want to go to that ultra long range with this radio, you can do so simply by adding on a module like this. Next, we're going to take a look at some testing on these modules with regards to RF power as well as power consumption on your radio. Okay, so taking a look at the RF power levels. Now, before we move forward, I need to stress something with regards to the Bandit Nano. We believe my module isn't actually working correctly and it isn't outputting its maximum RF power. I've been talking to Radiomaster on this and they expect all 3 modules to output the same level of RF, but my Nano module is coming in about 200 milliwatts under the other 2. If we take a look at the numbers, you can see here at peak, it's coming in at 809, whereas the Bandit Micro and the full-size Bandit module are literally coming in on the nail. We're getting 30 dBm or 1 watt on both of those modules consistently. Having had a long chat back and forth with Radiomaster, we've come to the conclusion that my Nano module isn't quite working as expected. They are actually shipping me a new one to test, and they have assured me that they expect all 3 modules to be able to deliver the same RF power. I actually think it's a power issue on my module. I have tried it with and without external power and it doesn't make a difference, but I am noticing the fan isn't kicking in when I would expect, and as a result of that, we actually believe that one to not be behaving correctly. What I will do is when I do receive the new module, I will confirm the results and publish that again later. However, here and now, we believe all 3 modules should deliver very similar levels of power. Next, moving over to power consumption. Now, I tested this at both 100 milliwatts output as well as the 1 watt output setting. This is purely the module power consumption in milliamp hour. This does not take into account your radio, and this will vary depending on the packet rate and the other ExpressLRS settings. Looking at the Bandit Nano, on 100 milliwatts, we were seeing about 130 milliamp hour, and then on the maximum RF power setting, we were seeing 320 milliamp hour. Moving over to the Bandit Micro, it's 160 milliamp hour at the lowest setting, and then 440 milliamp hour at the maximum 1 watt setting. Moving over to the full-size Bandit, you can see that the power does increase quite substantially here. We've got 320 milliamp hour on 100 milliwatts, and then 710 milliamp hour on the full 1 watt of RF output. It is worth me mentioning that it's not actually just the module RF power that does have an effect on this power consumption. For instance, the larger fan on the full-size module is what accounts for that massive increase in power consumption over the other 2 modules especially. I noticed in my testing, as that fan ramped up, the power consumption ramped up as well. So again, some of these little additional features do have an effect on the power consumption, whereas the bigger module is much beefier, has much better overall thermal capabilities. That comes at the cost of power consumption. Add then on top some of the other features such as the LEDs and stuff like that, whereas the smaller modules without the extra LEDs, smaller fans, are then going to consume less power. Next, we're going to do a bit of a teardown and take a look at what these modules are like inside, as well as highlight some specific features that you really do need to be aware of. Now, I'm not going to tear down the big module. There's no real great need to do that in this video. This has the UART connection on the outside if you wanted to use it for that airport functionality, so there's no need to go inside. However, we will tear down the Nano and the Micro. Now, both of these come apart fairly easily. We've got 4 screws on the front of this one, and then we've got 4 screws on the back of that one. So what I'm going to do is get them out, and then we'll take a look inside. Starting with the micro, I've taken the screws out, so we'll lift the lid, and then inside you can see we've got the main PCB down there at the bottom, and then there's another board on the back here which has our OLED display on. Now there is a nice easy jumper connection that goes between the two, so I'm just going to give that a wiggle and pop that out, which means we can free the 2 parts up. You can then see on here that there are some breakout pads there, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And then inside the module down here, you can see that there are some breakout pads as well. You've got our heatsink here in the middle with a fan that is horizontal, blowing air. So the fan is vertical, whereas the air is moving that through that heatsink horizontally. So this is actively cooled. And then we can see the antenna connection coming down there into the bottom of the board. So what I'm going to do is undo the screws, and then we'll pop this out. Okay, so the screws are removed, and we can now lift this board out. Now we're going to need to be careful because our antenna cable looks like it goes behind the PCB, comes up over this little cutout here and down to the board there. So what we're going to want to do is very carefully remove that in a minute, which is going to allow us to get in and take a closer look at the PCB in a little bit more detail. So looking around the module now, it's out, and the first thing I want to highlight is these pads here. These are those UART pads which I talked about earlier that allow you to use this as a direct telemetry modem with the likes of ArdriPilot on Mavlink, using it in that airport mode. Now to do this, you're going to need to solder onto those pads. It's not a plug-in connector, and then you could connect that up to a free UART on your flight controller, which is going to give you that airport functionality. If we spin it over and look on the back, we can see here is where pretty much most of the ExpressLRS stuff is. We have our voltage regulation stuff down the bottom here. You can see that simply by the coils and the regulators. We've then got our ExpressLRS chipsets. Now, under this light, I can't quite see which ones we've got. I'll hop in a little bit closer in a minute to take a look at that. You can see on each corner here, we've got our 2 antennas internally. One's a chip antenna there, one's a chip antenna there. One of these is likely the Wi-Fi, and one of these is the backpack functionality. And then we've got the other chipset used for the ExpressLRS system. The heatsink is mounted to the PCB with screws onto the back side. It'll be a very similar setup to what they've done in the past. They have no components on this side of the board at all, and bolt the heatsink down onto it, and then you get the heat transfer from that RF going through the PCB, and you can see they've got this fan mounted in the middle which is blowing air through the heatsink, and that's what's going to be keeping it cool, and there's some screws down there to hold that in place. The overall manufacturing on this looks really quite nice. There's a lot of thought gone into this design around here from the looks of it, and as I've said, then we've got our UFL down there for our antenna. So looking at the board under the microscope, first of all, looking at that UART, you can see the pads there, nice and easy to get to. You just need to solder a wire onto each one. Now, there isn't really a lot else to show on this side of the board. If we just go down to there, we have what looks to be a USB-C controller. Syllabs, yeah, so that'll be the controller for the USB-C input port. If we swap over to the other side of the board, and I'm probably going to need to refocus for this because we are a bit closer, we'll start in the top corner and work our way around the chipsets. So top left, we've got that ESP32 with that chip antenna over there. Moving along, we've got the SX1276. So that's the RF front end chipset. That's then going down into that area there. And you can see the matching circuit for that down that side there with the trace right there going into the can. Moving along, you can see pads there for the joystick. We've got a crystal. We've got another ESP, which is the 8285, with that chip antenna for that on the side as well, which is likely our backpack functionality. And then below this, we've got our voltage regulation over there, another one over there, with some additional pads on the board. So you've got S port, ground, battery in, if you wanted to. You've got a boot pad there for the ESP32. Another TX and RX pad over there as well. So again, plenty of options on this board to be able to connect to it if you wanted to directly. Next, moving over to the Nano Module. Now I've removed the screws and I'm just going to separate it off. Again, we've got a cable going between the halves, but this time instead of the cable going to the OLED display, it's going to the port on the back. So I'm going to just carefully withdraw that. Now, in this module, you can see all of the electronics looks to be actually on this side of the board. Again, very similar layout. We've got our UART for connecting up to that airport functionality down here on the side. Really nice and easy to get to on this board. All you'd have to do then is solder some wires on and you'd be ready to go. We've then, again, got our 2 chip antennas, one for our ExpressLRS Wi-Fi functionality and one for our backpack. And we've then got our chipsets down here. We've then obviously got some screws that are holding this in place. There's one there and one there. That looks like... No, that actually might be the fan. I'm not sure. Let me just give it a tug. Does it... Is it screwed in place? Or is it just pushed in? It is just pushed in. Withdrawing it forward, we can now see then we've got that OLED board on the front. And then... we've got a fan, again, in this module. Completely different fan, though, than what we saw on the other one. Blowing air down into that heatsink, which is on the front there again, mounted directly to our PCB. Then, at the bottom of the board, we've got our joystick, which we can clearly see, as well as our USB-C and our DC input. Now, on this one, it looks like some of the RF chipsets are located under here. We've got what looks to be our ESP32 down here, as well as our ESP8285 up the top there. We'll get it under the microscope in a second. And I'm guessing the SX chipset is hiding underneath the RF can. So starting in the top right, we can see we've got our voltage regulator and then our ESP8285, which will be our backpack. We can then scroll down and we can see our ESP32 is down there, which is fantastic to see. And then we've got our WinBond chip, we've got our USB chipset for our communications, our 40 megs oscillator there as well, our antenna port, and then various little pads located around the PCB if you wanted them. But then we've got our UART on the side there, which is really easy to get to. Okay, so just to share with you some thoughts on this. Now, as I mentioned at the start, this isn't a review, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you these are better than other modules on the market or these are the ones to go for over something else, because I haven't tested them in anger for a number of reasons. However, what I will say is this. I think it is fantastic to see Radiomaster bring what they've done on their Ranger modules into the 900 frequency band of ExpressLRS. Up until now, ExpressLRS really has lacked in sort of manufacturer adoption of the lower frequency band. 2.4 gigs has blown up and it has been a massive success. But I am really pleased to see manufacturers now start to turn their eyes towards 900 or 868. Radiomaster have done a real nice job here on these modules. I really like all of the options they're giving us. And again, you've got that 900 megs frequency, which is just going to go so much longer than you can get on 2.4. I said at the start of this video, I think this could be the beginning of the nail in the coffin for Crossfire. And the reason I say that is as follows. It isn't that Crossfire is bad, and it isn't that TBS don't deliver a great product. Frankly, Crossfire is fantastic at what it does. What it is, though, is somewhat limited with regards to the extra features and capabilities. It's a closed source project, and you just don't have that excitement around that like we've seen around ExpressLRS. On this side of things, we've seen all these manufacturers appear on the 2.4 gigs band, lots of cheap hardware, and now, again, as I've said, these manufacturers are turning their eyes down to 900 megs, and it's great to see Radiomaster leading the charge with what appears to be some really nice high-quality modules in this Bandit series. Now, price-wise, these are going to be available as follows. The full-size Bandit is going to be $99. That's the one that obviously gives you both the Nano as well as the micro bay option, but also the external CRFS port, which means you can use it with the likes of Futaba. The micro module, which is JR Bay, as well as the Nano module, are both going to be $49. Now, I think that is very aggressively priced considering what you're getting here. OLED displays, the external power input, and all of that backpack functionality as well. And what is really interesting when you look at these two modules is that is coming in roughly $20 less than an equivalent Crossfire module on either of these connections. More than that, though, these are going to be available, and you should see decent availability on these moving forward. And one of the biggest complaints from Crossfire users has been the availability of their components. Getting hold of a Crossfire module hasn't been easy for quite some time. With regards to the receivers, these are going to be available on the standard receiver for $19.99, so $20, and the BR3, which has that high power telemetry, for $25. If you want some of the additional accessories on these with regards to the antennas, so the T antenna, which is included with all three of these modules, is going to be $15, $14.99, and the Moxon, which you did see with the full-size Bandit, is going to be available for $19.99. Again, I genuinely think this is really going to give TBS a problem, because not only now do we have a major manufacturer in the world of ExpressLRS pushing into 915, but we also have a very competitive price point. And once we're through the initial production, availability should not be an issue, and that's going to mean that TBS really do need to up their game. If you're interested in getting a set, there will be a link to these in the description, not only the full-size Ranger module, but the Micro and the Nano as well. Now, I am really interested in hearing your thoughts on these modules. I will be making a video testing these out and about in the future. If you're interested in seeing that, please do make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Furthermore, I'd just like to say, if you'd like to support the channel to allow us to keep making content like this, please do consider checking out the links to our Patreon. It's only through the support of my patrons I'm able to keep making content on this channel, and if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a massive thank you from me to all of my Patrons. We would not be able to do this without your support. Anyway, that's it for me on this one. If you have any questions, put them down below. Stay safe, and I will speak to you soon.